welcome to Show Up, Stand Out. My name is Juliette Stapleton. I'm the host of the show, known as the Queen of Visibility. And today I absolutely love introducing you to Dino Tartaglia. And Dino, well, also known as Il Padrino, the Godfather of Business Thinking, that I came across online, and I fell in love instantly because everything that comes out of Dino's mouth, I'm sort of saying, oh my God, this is how I feel. And sometimes he puts it into words, and sometimes you know, it's nice to know that there's someone else with the thing that I usually call Juliette Stapleton effect. If you follow me, you know what I'm talking about. But Dino called it fractured thinking, and that's how we kind of started really kind of talking about it, because, you know, it's all about forgetting what you have to say when you have to speak or you do a video, and, you know, on going on rants, and then, you know, not remembering where you started or what was my problem. Is that the point? I can't remember what was the big point that I just told everybody, this big story, and then I forget, then I come back. And so I thought, you know what, guys, Dino would be a perfect guest. And I'm going to actually pass the baton and ask Dino, please, welcome to the show, first of all.
Thank you for having me.
I'm delighted. Just a few words about your background so our audience knows, you know, who you are.
Okay, so for anybody who knows the culture in the UK, I am about a year off getting a bus pass, so I'm of an age, and I've been so we're kicking around the block in business for the thick end of 40 years. So I started as a young, fairly bullish electronics engineer, electrical and electronic engineering, worked out in the oil and gas business for many, many years, and then started to get into, I went chartered, started to get into business development, got a taste for that, and then found myself blending that with troubleshooting skills from my engineering side and starting to fix problems in businesses, global businesses, what I call kitchen table entrepreneur businesses, really small businesses, and everything in between. So for many, many years now, I've been doing a mix of helping businesses grow, scaling down businesses, shutting businesses, developing and building some of my own. And then in the last 3 years, I've come online, and I'm starting to apply my trade online and helping businesses develop.
Amazing. I'm so glad that you came online, because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to find you. And something you just said, that you were helping from, you know, multi-billion global businesses to 50K kitchen table operations. Do you think that businesses in this kind of separate ends of the scale, in a way, are maybe struggling with some similar things?
Oh, great question. Massively. The problem or the challenge for us as coaches is, or even as freelance service providers coming into, or professional service providers coming into the larger businesses in particular, is first of all that the large businesses don't see that they have anything in common with the small business. And equally, the small business doesn't see that they have anything to do with corporate. Quite often you'll find that the small business owner got the hell out of corporate and doesn't want to even think about what corporate is like, because their life wasn't fabulous there. There's a lot of that. But the reality is, it all comes down to the individual. So I have this kind of view. I don't know if you've read Neil Donald Walsh's Conversations with God, Julia.
Not yet.
Very, very good read. Really interesting, thought-provoking. But in that, God, which is just us really, in the story, talks about the polar opposite of love, which is not, as most people would say, is hate, but is fear. And my view is that corporates are predominantly, having worked with a lot of them, are run on fear, whether it's intentional or not from the top down, which is the opposite of love. So you could say that it's a bit like, because a lack mentality comes from fear, and an abundance mentality comes from love. And if you look at corporate generally, you tend to find that it's more lack and more fear than it is love and abundance and expansive thinking. So I kind of, although I don't go in with that because they'd never hire me, that's the truth. I kind of have that in the back of my mind when I'm standing in front of a bunch of people, whether it's the C-suite or it's a bunch of mid-level managers or whatever, just looking at the body language, and also the actual language that's used to understand what I'm stepping into, because generally what they ask me to go and deal with is never the root cause of the problem. And to be fair, That is exactly the same in small businesses. Everybody focuses on a symptom and what they think will fix that and address it. And actually, that's not what the problem is.
That is so interesting. In fact, when I was I worked in hospitality a lot. And, I remember I was always very expansive. I think I wasn't born to work within the corporate environment. And this created terrible problems for me, and except for, say, the owner who would always see me. I always knew the owner has a special place for me, but everybody else in the management line would have been so unhappy that I was thinking big like that I was actually thinking like, let's think about this as a business. And it was real soul destroying. And in a way, I'm very happy. And yes, as you were saying, there's definitely not a lot of related relationships that I've had and even thinking now back to that time of my life. However, well, most of our audience, and I know that some of the people who come to me and who I help with, they did come from the corporate and they have exactly the same attitude. And yet most of them would be starting or, solopreneurs, very small teams at the moment. What would you reckon for them? And you said, they're looking at the symptoms, they're not looking at the roots of the problem. So what are the symptoms and what are the roots, just to give them some sort of examples, to make it clear?
Okay. So quite often people concentrate on themselves and the pain that they're in. And that often distorts, particularly with small businesses, it distorts the perception of the business. And they get, I find, quite emotional sometimes about trying to fix a problem that they think is the problem. In point of fact, that's a symptom. Or what we used to say in the engineering world, a fault masking a fault. So there's a surface level problem that isn't the main problem, and you have to dig. So there are a few techniques and a few things to kind of look at, but we start generally with just standing back and asking the question, what if this problem that how I'm feeling, which might have manifested as a tension in a relationship at home, for example, or a feeling of that imposter syndrome. I'm going to get rumbled. I can't really do this. I'm not as good as people think, or a whole raft of other things. I just can't run a business because they're experiencing feast and famine. So they're drowning in fulfillment one minute with clients, and then the next minute it's kind of ghost town in terms of the pipeline, and they've got to go out and start foraging for people to talk to get sales again. And there's this gap. So whatever the pain is in terms of how it manifests, they generally go to the wrong place, and quite often it affects their heads. I was talking this morning actually about mechanics of a mindset, and very simply that is, start by asking the question: where in the business does this emanate from? So where am I looking for this? So I'm feeling this problem or this pain. I'm feeling uncertainty about my business, which is impacting my confidence because I'm failing to show up on camera, for example. I'm failing to show up on social media. Okay, what is that? Well, that's a confidence problem. Why have I got a confidence problem? Well, if I dig in, I feel uncertain. Why am I feeling uncertain? What could be causing that? Rather than just, I think it's this. Okay, let's go and have a look at the business. Well, what do I need to feel certain, to have conviction about my business? Well, first of all, conviction comes from the fusion of clarity and confidence. That's what conviction is. So do I have clarity on how my business should be working and what I want from my business? Do I have confidence that the business can deliver that and that I can deliver that? Generally, the answers to those questions is no. So then we start digging into, okay, how do I get that? What are the things that I need to do? And suddenly we start talking in a more constructive way about what do we need rather than what do we have to fix. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And really what I'm picking up is that a lot of the time, it's not actually the business or even the systems you have, but it is something to do with you and you, actually you, who you are, how you see yourself, how you feel about yourself. And as you said, there could be like completely external factors that are contributing to how we're showing up in our business. Am I getting this right?
Yes and no. It is both. So we have a model that we call character-led business. I have a joint venture with a dear friend called Simon Hartley, who's a world-class coach and sports psychologist. So I found him when he was plying his trade in the sports arena with Premiership Rugby. So Simon and I became good friends years and years ago, and we kind of bumped into each other about 3 years ago and decided to By then he was a keynote speaker, an in-demand coach, 6 books published. He's now published 8 books, etc., etc. And I said, you know what, there's a lot of your kind of philosophies that need to get out in the world. I've got some of my own. Why don't we bring the business mechanics, the strategic thinking, and the sort of personal and character development stuff that he was doing, and bring that together? And here's why. In business, and I'm kind of going to come to your point, Julia, but this is a philosophy maybe that might frame things for the guys listening. In business, particularly when it's you that's driving, literally sort of driving the boat, as it were, you need strategic direction. So think of that like a rudder on a boat. If you're going to get anywhere, you need something that's going to point you there in the first place. So you need a plan. So strategy, strategic thinking, strategic direction. You also need a leak-proof boat. So you need a vessel essentially you're not bailing out all the time with cash flow problems and whatever. And then you need 2 oars. Now most people have one big paddle, which is business development, sales, etc. But the other oar we maintain is character development. You develop yourself. Now some people mistakenly call that leadership. That's an element of it. But character is really the outward expression of who we are. That's a formation of our identity, our beliefs, which come from our beliefs and values. So what we believe fundamentally, what values we hold fundamentally, express through our identity, or form our identity. Outwardly, that expresses as character. So then traits, characteristics like courage and integrity and honesty and consistency and all those great things. So my short answer to this is absolutely it's about us. Our personal performance directly drives and is responsible for the business performance, whatever size it is. But I always say to people, first and foremost, go looking at the setup in your business and identify whether or not you've got your ducks lined up in a row, and look at yourself. Don't assume that the failings of the business are your failings. I see a lot of mindset coaches plying their trade there, when actually the problem really, a lot of the issues with people's heads start with the fact that the business just isn't delivering what they need. So, but equally, you can't let yourself off the hook. Are you showing up consistently? Because you know that that's one of the things the business requires. Are you making regular sales calls and not, crying into the wind every day? Because that's what the business requires. So always think of the business like a child, like it's like a small baby. It has a life of its own and it has needs. If you don't attend to that, then you're being a bad parent, essentially. And that always comes back to you, but you still always start with what does the baby need? What does the business need? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Actually, that's baby analogy is really good, because, if you are not feeding your baby, if you're not changing your baby, you are actually a bad parent, but you don't need to go away and start punishing yourself thinking I'm a bad parent. Just go and feed the baby and change the baby. That's all you have to do.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love this. And it's all about, really, it's about the KPIs that you have in your business. I think a lot of people don't understand. And I was one of them for a long time. Maybe that's because I'm not a words person. So sometimes like a simple terminology and I just don't get it until I get it. And with KPIs, my story was like, I just heard this word and I ran away from it. I didn't know that maybe that is saying to yourself, speak to 10 people this week, just chat to them, or do 5 live streams, or, write 2 articles. And I didn't even see that this is what this is. And even though I'm naturally very action driven, so I would be, people say, you're so consistent, but that's also a natural thing to take action. Because I understand, like with the baby, you have to do things. But it's also like this mindset. I loved what you mentioned about the mindset coaches, because you said to me before, mindset is not, some people say mindset is 90% of your business, but is it? Is there something else?
Okay, so that's a great question. So I have a view which Tony Robbins fans will probably not be happy about, because he and many other people talk about success in business being 90% mindset. Now, to be fair, in terms of what they mean, I have no track with that. There's no issue. But actually, it comes from a deeper level. So the very, and it is a very, very simplistic model, just to explain it, because things get more complex than this. But a very simplistic model we have is the identity ladder. And it starts, as I said earlier, with your beliefs and values. That forms your identity, which is how you see yourself and also how you relate to the world and how you think the world relates to you. That's your identity. Mindset coaches who are good, and there are plenty of those, will go after identity. But then they don't say this. They talk about mindset. But if you work through the ladder, mindset is more a moment-to-moment thing. So you have beliefs and values, then identity, then character, outward expression of your identity, character traits. Then you have your mental game or mindset. And what that is your moment-to-moment decision-making and thinking. Then you've got behaviors, and then you've got outcomes. So behaviors are driven pretty much by, you can argue behaviors are driven by mindset, but outcomes ultimately are driven by character. Yeah. So that those sort of snap things that we do where we quite often might reflect and think, oh God, you know what, I shouldn't have said that, shouldn't have done that. Mindset. The longer term view, the longer term patterns of behavior, character. That makes sense? And that's
yes, yeah, it does.
So if you want something, in 3 months' time, you know that old expression, the summer body is made in the winter. Yeah. So if you've got that longer term kind of view, that's character. If you are dealing with somebody in the moment and trying to get a sale over the line, one could definitely character figures in that, but generally that's all about mindset. That's in the moment. Yeah. So we talk about character because character drives the long-term behaviors and therefore the long-term outcomes.
That is very interesting, and I'm just going to share here about me, and you can see how this fits into what you're saying, because sure. I'm someone who is very intuitive, right? So I go by my gut, and my gut says what's right, what's wrong. I follow this. I have been practicing it and making it sharper and sharper and trusting, and that really works for me. Now, guys, this works for me because it's my personal thing, right? So I do. For me, it's good to live in the now. And I do have a problem with the long-term planning because flexibility is how my life unfolds best, right? This is what I know. And the same in business, looking back, it's fine. But then when you talk about character, then the traits like tenacity, perseverance, consistency, maybe trust the long-term plan, even though you don't know exactly what it is step by step. Would that be something that you were talking about?
It's a really good way of putting it, Juliette. Yeah, we have an expression, traits before states. Tony Robbins and the like talk about mental states and about getting in state, which is a transient thing. Traits are character traits. They're your characteristics. They're long term. They're the things that you can develop, so you can become more courageous. You can have greater integrity, but they are far more kind of they're fused into who you are. So we talk about that a kind of great deal, and it's important, I think, to think more of the fact that character and character traits, although they drive long-term behavior, it's not a strategic thing. That's a separate thing. So if you for example set goals, but you're one of the 95% of people on the planet for whom goal setting, more importantly goal chasing, and hitting a goal and hitting a target does not give you a buzz, and is not where the challenge is, and you're more challenge driven or puzzle driven, which is a lot more people. We have I don't know if you're familiar with insights as a personality methodology.
Not yet. That's on my next list.
Okay, so 4 colors basically. The 4 kind of colors that go after the kind of Jungian basic archetypes. Red is a goal setting type. Yellow is an entrepreneurial type. Blue is the kind of what we call the accountant, if you like, the blue analytical type. Green is the socially inclusive person. Yeah, wants everyone to be happy. Yeah. So red, for example, would say, I've got the flag, I'm going up the hill, I'm going to take the mountain, and I'm going. If you want to come, you can come, but I'm going. Whereas the green, which is the opposite of that type, would say, look, I'm going to go up the hill with a flag, but it'd be really cool if you could come along. It would be nice if we all did it together. That's kind of how it is. So I think if you kind of meld all of that up and understand that most people are not goal driven, then setting goals to give you a direction, which is strategic, rather than an end in itself. Yeah. That's what, for me at least, that's what drives most people. And that's where character really comes into it, because then once you've got your direction in the direction of the goal, then you set your process to deliver that journey, if you will. And then it's all about working the process, and that is all character and all execution.
I'm so glad that you've raised this this whole concept. Too many people are focusing on being disappointed that they are not getting the buzz from chasing the goals and hitting the goals. I don't. Honestly, I don't. I really don't even. I honestly can create a plan and I don't care inside if I hit it or not. In fact, the more I think about hitting it, the more it depresses me and stops me from, actually enjoying the process, which is enjoying the process and being energized is the most important thing for me to be driven. So personally for me, I'm a very challenge driven person. I can challenge myself and I can do something, and I like short kind of leaps and just can get, I'll get this done today. That's it. It's not a goal. It's just challenge myself. Can I do it or not? It's not even a proving thing. It's just the thing, and it energizes me. But I think that letting go of, a lot of discourse that is out there, people telling you need to get in a state of mind. As you said, that's a momentary thing. You can't be in one state of mind all the time, and then you feel bad about yourself that you are not able. Then you feel like you're an inadequate person because you're not hitting your goals, you're not goal oriented or whatever is happening. And I find that so many people, especially women, actually, because women are more critical to themselves in general, they suffer with imposter syndrome more, especially as we grow a bit older and 40 plus. And then even though we are brilliant, we have the experience in life, we have everything, and yet we're constantly destroying ourselves with our thoughts in our minds because of this, what we're hearing, and it doesn't match what actually is happening. And so I think it's a really, really good way of looking at, when you're focusing on the character-led business model and that sort of concept, it helps you empower yourself in a way. That's the feeling I'm getting. It's an empowerment.
There's a really simple model that we use, Juliette, within this, or process, I should say. Technique would be the right word. So it's something like, I value integrity. Okay, so that's one of your values. Then you look at yourself and you say, okay, so where would I rate my own integrity? Now, bear in mind that there's nothing empirical about this. You decide on a scale of 0, which is satanic, pretty much, through to 10, which is kind of saintly, on that scale, where do you sit? Rate yourself. And it's entirely arbitrary. So you might say, well, I think I'm a 5. Awesome. Okay. So the next question is not how do you get to a 10, but how do you get to a 6? And also, why are you not a 0? Why are you a 5 by your own reckoning? And once you've got that nailed, what I then say to people is, fine, go and stress test that. Put yourself in a situation where your integrity is going to be challenged, and then come back. And quite often people will come back and say, they might have said they were a 7. They'll come back and say, you know what, I think I'm a 4. Because I tested this and I really should have stepped up and, say it's a work situation or it's a client situation. The client said this, and every fiber of my being said that I should have put a boundary in and said no and explained why, but I was afraid of losing the client. So I backed down, and that essentially bang goes my integrity. So I think actually I'm a 4 and I need to work on that. Awesome. Now we've got a 4, no judgment. Why are you not a 0? Oh, well, because of this, this, and this. Brilliant. Okay, how do we get to a 5? That's the process. That makes sense?
Absolutely. It's and I'm sort of smiling because, as we are chatting today, just before we went chatting, I did a live stream that was all about the integrity, but integrity also to yourself, and especially with promises or something that the client said and you said, yes, maybe I'll do that for you, because not always sometimes for the money, but sometimes you want to genuinely to help, but then you realize that you shouldn't have rushed into this promise because this actually eats you inside, the fact that you will have to deliver on this particular thing that you actually don't like doing, and things like that, and so it's a very interesting assessment where you are, putting it to the test, and then also acknowledging why you are where you are and you're not somewhere lower. So because we have to really base ourselves on our achievements too, or where we stand, the good part. It's not all about how far it is to the 10.
Yeah, very, very much. And I think the other thing is just suspending judgment. Just remove it. This is an observational thing. It is subjective because you're coming up with your own kind of your own scoring system. But ultimately, you look at it as an objective thing and just go, okay, where am I? Where do I feel that I need to improve? How can I move from where I now think I am to where the next, not to where I want to be, but the next step? Because again, this is part of understanding how to build a process, not trying to get to the end destination. Again, we strip that away. We're not aiming for 10, we're aiming for the next step, which is a 4 to a 5 or a 7 to an 8. That's what we're doing. The other thing is being self-effacing enough to understand that and not over-egg it, which is why you stress test. You go, okay, that's what I think I am. Let's go and check that out. And again, suspend judgment. You are simply looking at this as if you were a third party looking at yourself. That's all you're doing. The other thing probably worth mentioning, because you talked there a little bit about freedom and about responsibility, although they weren't the words that we used. But yeah, sometimes we want these things and we don't show up. Yeah, massive problem in the online space, because guess what? We are our own bosses, and we generally have pretty bad bosses. Bad, not great parents to the baby, the business.
No, it's true.
Yeah, and actually, just to loop back, just to go a bit tangential on this, just on the baby thing, one of the things that's probably worth the guys listening in thinking about if they've got children is, when you've got a very young baby and it's crying, and you've done everything, you've changed its nappy and you've rocked it and you've fed it, and it's still crying, and it hasn't got wind, and you think, well, it's not in pain. What the heck? And you're out of ideas. That happens so often with businesses. You look at the business and you just don't know. Now, a lot of women friends of mine, if they're completely out of ideas, at some point, they're either going to be round at the mothers, or they're going to be picking up the phone to the moms, and they're going to be saying, what do I do? Yeah. And yet in business, we seem to think that we have to try and figure this out on our own. Go get hold of somebody that knows what they're doing, has been through this, has had 5 kids, and that's figured it out, and get some information, get some intelligence about that, get another perspective. So that's just to kind of add that in to that analogy.
I love it. And you know what? I'm going to say this, and this is very unpopular opinion, but I brought up a really, the child, like, I'm proud the way I brought up my only child, right? When that happened, I've never had children before. I lived outside. We didn't have mobile phones, like to ring my mom straight away. So when the baby cried and I knew that it was fed and it was everything, and it was also maybe a time to sleep, I did cold turkey. In 2 weeks, baby stopped crying and started sleeping during the day. And everybody was saying, you have a golden baby. The baby has routines. And maybe sometimes we don't need to get stressed out, but we actually need to keep going with the way we are going. Yeah. And so then in a couple of weeks, things align, and it doesn't seem like a big problem anymore. In fact, it all fell into place. Everything falls into place. Maybe you're overthinking. So that's just a little parenting experience that I had.
But absolutely perfect. You know what? I've got friends who've done that, who just swear by structure, and it's worked perfectly for them. Equally, I've got friends, and this is the other, we could go all day on this analogy, talking about blueprints that don't work for people because they work for somebody else who's a different person. They've tried the structure, but the bit they've missed is they've come home from work and they've been stressed to the gunnels, and guess what? The baby's picked up on it. Yeah, but they don't know that. So they're going, well, this thing's not working. And actually, that's not the situation. The environment's just been wrong for the child, because they're picking up the energy. So yeah, but they don't know that. So there's all this sort of stuff. Flipping back to, we're talking about the kind of responsibility thing, doing the things that need to happen for the business, and that inherently you've got to do it. Have you read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning?
No, not yet.
Phenomenal book. Okay, so in that, so he talks about his experience in Auschwitz, and so it's just one of those kind of like right up there as my kind of number one book to read. In it, Frankl says he says many really powerful things. But one of the things he says is for the statue, if we have a Statue of Liberty on the East Coast in America, we should have a Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast. In other words, if you want more freedom, you have to take more responsibility. And we often use the term accountability for an external source of that, but actually internal accountability is personal responsibility. And what I say to all of the people that generally that I chat to, whether it's in work, in a work environment, or it's in a business environment where they've kind of starting to develop self-determination and building their own life in business, is if you want the freedom, because pretty much everybody I talk to, they want the challenge and they want the recognition, but ultimately they want freedom and choice. That's why they set up the business in the first place. So if you want the freedom, take a leaf out of Viktor Frankl's book and understand you also need to be personally responsible. And if you understand the connection between the two, the more freedom you want, the more choice you want, the more personally responsible you have to be, then you've got to find a way to show up every day and do the things that you have to do to grow your business and nurture your business.
I love it. 3 years ago, when I started my online visibility journey, first it was all about, I need to be in control of my life. But the realization as the years went by, and I was building it as me, it was much more about, it was me who was responsible, and I loved it. It was scary, it was hard to embrace. It's much easier if something just falls onto your plate and you don't have to personally do anything for it, but actually it's less satisfactory too. I'm learning, and it is something like it's a hard challenge, talking about challenging yourself. But I think that embracing that, it is a personal responsibility, and you are the one who can make miracles happen in your life, but you have to step up.
Yeah, very, very, very much. I think you have to understand that it begins and ends with you. You are the engine that drives the business. Even if you've got a massive team, even if you're in the C-suite and you're driving, 1,000. There's 1,000 people that sit there. It flows from the top. So with a small business, if you are it, then you are the team to a large extent. But equally, just on that, there is a wider team. That your clients are part of your team. And I think a lot of people don't see that. They think of team as being the staff they employ or the outsourcers. The bank manager is part of your team. There are wider connections. So I think if you have that kind of more encompassing, if you like, and wider view, and start thinking about that, then what do all teams need to run well? They need a leader. So then we come back to personal responsibility, developing your own character, and just basically being the best that you can on a. And I say this to a lot of people, Juliette. There is this kind of false, and I see it a lot from guys, not so much from women, as kind of punching the air, motivation warrior type thing about being the best you can, and the Grant Cardone sort of sort of hype thing. And I don't hold to that. I think the idea is that you simply show up as your best self, or better than you were, maybe a week ago, more frequently. So you have less bad days, and fewer average days, and a number of better days, if you like, and you go for that 1% in improvement. We call that raising the floor. So don't shoot for the goal, just raise the floor of your performance, because if your average is better than your competitors and better than your averages were a year ago, guess what? You're never going to fall below your systems and your average day, but you may not hit your goal, but you're always going to do better, and it's more reliable. It creates a baseline. So very, very much the idea of raising the floor, of just getting better over time, maybe not every single day, and taking your foot off your own throat if that isn't happening on a daily basis, because it isn't necessary.
I love what you just said. Take the foot off your own throat. Yeah. Because that's what we do, and that actually chokes us and keeps us down. Instead of doing that, progressively getting better, and sometimes giving yourself a break. Okay, you wanted to do a daily live stream, and then one day you just didn't do it. Maybe you were sick, maybe you were just life interfered, and instead of then, that's what we do. We stop ourselves. Instead of just saying, okay, fair enough, I'm just going to from tomorrow I'm going to continue doing it, and just trying to improve slightly, because it definitely is always an improvement. So I love this, and it's a very healthy approach. I don't particularly buy into Tony, with all due respect, into Tony Robbins and this whole motivation is short-lived. I can feel very motivated now after this conversation, but then in the evening when my energy is all spent and I'm tired, the motivation is gone too. And then tomorrow I wake up and I didn't have enough coffee, and motivation is not there. So motivation is not what we really need long term.
I think that kind of transient motivation, I absolutely agree, and it can be confused with energy. Yeah. And I agree with that. There's a concept that Simon brings in from sport, which is called the performance spiral, and it all starts with curiosity, which then drives interest. So interest follows focus, and focus really tends to come from what you really care about. So if you imagine you're deeply curious about something, which a lot of the listeners and your people will be, You're deeply curious about something. You want to know why somebody behaves in a certain way, or why something works a certain way, or how you solve a certain thing. And you go down the rabbit hole of this naturally. Yeah. So that's your curiosity. That curiosity tends to keep us engaged, which means that we focus. If we focus, we tend to learn more or do more that develops skill. If we get more competent at something, we tend to be more confident, because evidence builds confidence. Yeah. So there's this nice causal effect between curiosity driving focus, focus developing confidence, and confidence, because we like being confident, then tends to drive motivation. Yeah. So focus, confidence, motivation, upwardly mobile spiral. The reverse of this is that we aren't really interested, or we're not deeply curious, so we don't focus. We don't focus, we tend not to get the evidence, we don't get the evidence, we don't have the confidence, we start self-doubting. So our motivation goes into a downward spiral, which we call the entrepreneurial death spiral, because it's exactly the opposite. You see it with athletes, you see it with sports people, and you see it with entrepreneurs. It's just human psychology. So there's an idea, maybe for the guys listening, about what fuels and what drives motivation. And the other part of that, of course, is, and that generally comes from the deep curiosity, you actually need to want to do the thing. If it's a should or a need, then that's pretty weak. The really strong motivational driver is I want to do this. Yeah. So pour all that in, then you've got a motivational mix that actually lights a fire under people. That works. Now, in terms of the transient nature of all of that and feeling motivated every day, in my view, you're absolutely right. It's a bit like willpower. There's a bank. You can only last for so long. You need other tools and other things in the mix. But in terms of the mechanics of motivation, that's pretty much how we see it.
I love it. And I love that you mentioned willpower, because that's another concept that some people think that you have to have daily willpower to do something. Yeah. I will be honest with you. And I know that a lot of people say, Juliette, you're so consistent, but my willpower is very short-lived. And sometimes I say I have none, and that's okay too, because that's not actually what makes it all work in the long run.
Yeah. There are other things in play. It's like the D word, discipline. Yeah. A lot of people anchor on that, and to be fair, my mentor and just a genius man, Jim Rohn, that was one of his big things. Actually, one of my favorite books talks about the value of discipline. But actually, there are other things going on and other things in place. And the truth is, for most people, providing they're ready for it, structure is one of the things, and clarity. You understand why you want something and what it is that you want and how to go after it. Those things tend to create what looks like discipline. It's an illusion. It looks like it creates willpower, but it's an illusion. It's the structure and the clarity delivers it. Different thing.
I absolutely love it. Dino, for anyone who fell in love with you instantly, like I did when I saw your first live stream, like the first day that we connected, how can they get in touch with you and find out more about maybe character-led business model and learn more?
Cool. Okay. So the main website, which is successengineers.co, www, obviously. So successengineers.co is a place to go. Find me on Facebook. I'm Dino Tartaglia on Facebook. Easy enough to pin down. We have a free Facebook group. People are very, very welcome to come and join in, which is also called Success Engineers. So they're probably the three kind of places to go, and just engage with me. I'm pretty approachable. And if any of the guys have got any questions or anything that's troubling them, if you will, in terms of in connection with the things we've spoken about, more than happy to put a little bit of time aside for any of your people and just have a chat.
That's fantastic. Guys, I'm going to put links to find Dino with this episode of Show Up, Stand Out. Dino, thank you so much for being such a generous guest and sharing with us. And I absolutely loved the concepts that we've touched on today. And guys, I will see you next week in another episode of Show Up, Stand Out. Stay visible and see you later.